Hey everyone, I'm 12 News meteorologist Steve Matregrano, joined by 12 News meteorologist Catie McNeil. Thank you for joining us on another Beyond the Forecast. And this time around, we're talking, winter safety tips and cold weather. Of course, it's been very cold the last, it seems like several weeks really, but some of the coldest air of the season that we've been seeing has been recently. So we're going to talk about things that you can keep in mind when you're at home to keep you and your family and pets safe.
Because of course, below average temperatures like the ones we've been seeing, especially this week, are not the norm for this area.
Right.
Usually the average temperature still this time of year is around 37, 38 degrees, and we've been almost 20 degrees below that in most spots this week.
Well, below that. And the weather for us, we had a little bit of snow as well. And, down south, they're seeing snow along the Gulf Coast states. So, we've had a lot of cold air around not just our area, but also much of the country too, especially the eastern half of the country. So we have some questions to answer. We can jump right into those here. Question 1. This is from Christopher in Barrington. What was the coldest temperature ever recorded in Rhode Island? So this was a great question. It, of course, fits what we're looking out outside. Mm-hmm. It's certainly very cold. And I will say that this coldest temperature was reached a long time ago.
Yeah. Back
in the 1930s, 1934 to be exact. And you can see in that purple shaded area there, if you can see the text in the middle of your screen, it's minus 17. Now these numbers are taken at Providence or at the airport in Warwick. So that's the official record keeping location.
So some spots likely on that day farther
Yes.
north were even colder than that.
Most likely in the places up north and west of the city probably were several degrees colder than that. But on records, for record purposes, we of course have the one in Warwick. So that was at the airport, again, 1934, February 9th. So it shows you, even in the month of February, we can get that cold, and we're only in January, and we're seeing, some pretty cold numbers.
I did want to mention that as well, that statistically our coldest temperatures are in the month of February, and with the trend we've already seen so far, it wouldn't surprise me if we had a few more pretty cold days ahead of us in the next month or so.
Yeah, Catie, so far this winter, and really going back to before the holidays, it's just been consistently cold, and we've had a few days here and there where we reached the 40s and 50s. Actually, just this month we hit 51 degrees as a high, so it can happen when we get some warmer days in there.
But a lot of those times it's been associated with precipitation as well. Right. When you get that kind of southwesterly shift in winds, brings the warmer air, but this time of year, unfortunately, it's usually accompanied with some rain as well.
Yes, and on that day it actually did bring some rain. So, and the story so far this winter, I feel like it's just been dry and cold. We haven't had a lot of snow either. Number 2 for our next question. Catie, I don't know if you want to do this one or take this one out.
Yeah, so this is from April in Barrington. Is this nonsense weather we have because of global warming, and what's the predicted outcome eventually? Another ice age, ? So on a broader scale, we, I believe, are in a post-glacial period. So whenever the last ice age was thousands of years ago, we are in a post-glacial or ice age period since then. This is bringing me back to my college days.
I know, right? I'm like, oh man.
Climatology days in school. But in the short term, there are these much larger, broader weather patterns that we're seeing in the long term, hundreds and thousands of years from now, that things are changing. Right. Hence why we do consistently study and see climate change across the decades and centuries. But I would say in the short term, these are just weather patterns that we see year to year. Yeah. It is not necessarily a glimpse at the larger picture.
Right, and there are statistics that back up that yes, things are warming and whatnot. But when we're talking about our weather on a particular day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, even month-to-month basis, it's all about weather patterns. It's where the jet stream shapes up. They're seeing snow down the Gulf Coast states. Can't say the last time that's happened, maybe if ever, historically. Yeah. So, and to them, that's on the wintry side of things. So, it does impact, it makes some winter storms stronger. It makes maybe some hurricanes stronger, maybe more frequently. But it's all about the weather patterns. And, of course, I guess in theory we're warming, and we're also maybe one day going to another ice age, right, down the road.
And if you think about in the summertime, we talk about these high pressure domes that kind of trap the hot air and bring heat waves. It is essentially the same idea this time of year. So if you're seeing relatively dry weather across the country for a long period of time, and that high pressure is just kind of sitting there along with the wind speeds coming in with the jet stream, that can bring a period of dry but very cold weather over a length of time. And these are large weather systems at play here. It's not your localized shower, things like that. These are large systems that circulate across the globe.
Yeah, and I actually, one more point on this. I had someone ask me recently, is this cold air we're seeing the polar vortex? And that term has come around recently, last several years, I guess you can say. But it's always been around. It's always been there.
It's always there.
Right? We always get cold air. Yeah, it's always there.
We'll get sometimes a touch of that, not so much here as even areas farther north, northern New England, northern Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, we'll see a little bit more of that. But when you get these dips in the jet stream, we're getting a little bit of that Arctic air coming in, which is what we've been seeing this week.
Yes, and it's weather patterns that happens, and we'll see how long the cold air lasts. For all we know, maybe it'll get warmer down the road in a couple months. We'll see. But looking at question 3 here, this is a really important winter safety, I guess you'd say, question, because especially, again, with the brutal cold we've been seeing recently, I'm sure a lot of these, are happening, the space heaters, and unfortunately maybe leading to some fires. So question 3, this is from Catherine in Providence. Are space heaters and heated blankets dangerous to have in your home? She says she's heard they're unsafe and could start fires. So, first with that, I will say, I think it's a two-part question of not necessarily it's dangerous to have.
They're unsafe to have, but anything unattended is unsafe. And we've talked to several fire departments who have echoed that sentiment, that it's okay to have space heaters and things of that nature, but you want to make sure that you're not going to sleep with them on, and that they're not left unattended when you're not home, especially.
Right. And so, Catie, we have this graphic here that we can look at. So these are home fire hazards, and there's, of course, many of them when it comes to winter weather. But first and foremost, I put down candles, because I feel like that's one way that people want to warm up sometimes, or just, whether it's the festive reasons around the holidays, using candles. Of course, they could spread. One of your pets could knock them over. That's one issue there. Cooking as well, stove tops, leaving the heat on too long, or walking way to do laundry or something.
And with ovens, one thing I spoke with Deputy Fire Chief in Seekonk was to never use your oven as a heating source.
Yes, good point.
Because some people may do that if it's really cold and maybe their heat is off, or whatever various reasons are. That is never a safe option to use your oven as a heating source.
Especially when you're going to bed, leaving it overnight. It's one thing maybe, if you're around and you're keeping an eye on it, like you're cooking food, that's one thing, but never do it overnight while you're sleeping. Dangerous things there. Next, which again, this leads us to the space heater part of the question. Yes. So this one is, you don't want to ever leave them unattended, but running for a long period of time, you want to make sure that the cords are properly, plugged into the ones that can actually handle the heat and the amount of energy used to keep it going.
And you want to keep a 3-foot radius around the entirety of it. You don't want to have any blankets near it, any flammable items, because those could catch fire.
Yeah, and actually you can see on the graphic there, it's the #1 cause of house fires, again, mainly in the winter months and then the colder months, because of, most of the time you're at home, you're most likely probably trying to keep warm somehow, and, that's just, they're unsafe when left unattended. We'll leave it at that. Then finally here, also electrical fires, which is, again, one of those higher ones during the winter months that lead to home fires. And you can see, the wires lead to, whether they're old or they're, just
exposed,
in bad condition.
Old power strips, things like that. Again, if left unattended, or if there's kind of an unsafe handling of that, those things can catch fire pretty easily.
Right, and it's just one of those things where, I feel like sometimes it's back in the back of the mind, like you don't think of those things on a daily basis. I know for a fact I don't. But it's always good to keep in mind, want to keep those.
Yeah, but the short answer is no. Heated blankets and space heaters are not unsafe. It's just something you don't want to just leave on, especially if you're not at home. So with that, let's go to question 4. This is from Jason in East Providence. Why has it been so cold this month? What was the highest temp we've seen this year so far? Of course, we did kind of touch on this before, but again, the reason why it's been so cold this month at the start of the year, and it went before this as well, December was a below average month, and parts of November as well. It's just kind of the pattern that has set up so far this winter. And again, we're not just seeing that here in southern New England, we're seeing it nationally as well. Parts of the country that normally would not see temperatures below 60s and 70s are seeing 50s and 40s, which down in Florida, for example, is very cold for folks down there this time of year.
They're seeing, accumulating snow. Some locations have seen more snow than we have, which is kind of crazy to think about that.
Yeah, we've been
New
tracking
Orleans
this
is,
blizzard warning.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine works in Lake Charles, and they had a blizzard warning there, and it was his first time reporting in the snow down in Louisiana. So definitely some very interesting patterns we've seen so far this year.
Yeah, they're taking the snow from us down there in the Gulf Coast states. And again, one of the things is that's where the jet stream currently is located. It has been for a while now. Is just too far to the south for us to get any storms. I know we had a little bit of snow recently, but in terms of like an active pattern, a lot of them have missed us to the south. The Mid-Atlantic got some snow, of course, now down south. So the jet stream is, in a way to say, is almost too far south that it's just cold and dry here. It's almost overly
and that's
too cold.
something to take into account because people may think, oh, well, it's cold. Why aren't we seeing snow? But if it's too cold or too dry, that almost chokes rather the moisture that we would see potentially from a system that would come through, kind of dries it out, and then we're not seeing any of that precipitation.
Right, and if you want like a typical New England nor'easter kind of snowstorm, you want that jet stream and the track of the storm to be further north because you want to be close enough to get in on the actual moisture from the storms. And right now we're not seeing that, and that's kind of been the case. I feel like all winter long we just haven't really had any of those storms move through. Whether it's rain or snow, it's been kind of a quiet period.
We had a couple
things here and there.
near things where we thought we were going to get a bigger storm, and obviously we still have a while to go here this winter.
Plenty of winter left.
But how the jet stream adjusts will kind of determine the type of air that we're seeing, these shifts and whatnot, if we're going to see a bigger storm.
Yeah.
So
to be determined.
Yeah.
We'll see, right? And that question actually that you just answered, that was from Jason in East Providence. There's actually a second part of it. What was the highest temp we've seen so far this year? So I went back and looked at 2024. 2025, it's been 51 degrees in January so far. So it's been mild a couple days, but for the most part, it's been cold. 2024, actually, we had a couple days where it was actually pretty hot in the summertime, as is expected. Hottest day from last year was 93 degrees. That was June 20th, and actually the coldest from last year was not too long ago.
Yeah, we had
December.
kind of a cold snap right around Christmas time, and that's kind of going along with that. This trend we're seeing this year is kind of continuing from what we were already seeing at the end of last fall and early winter.
And it just seems like it's been cold really since before the holidays.
One of the coldest winters I remember in a few years.
It's been quite some time that we've had a warm stretch of weather here. So I know a lot of people are hoping that spring and summer are not too far away, but we do still have plenty of winter to get through.
Yes.
And looking at our next question, it's still winter related. So it's question 5. This is from Charles in Cranston, and it asks, how much snow are we expected to get for the rest of winter? So again, that really depends, I'd say, at least in my opinion, is on the jet stream, because if that jet stream just stays so far to the south where we miss out on some of the bigger opportunities for storms, we're not going to be able to accumulate a lot of snow in terms of total
Because
snowfall.
in this high pressure dome that's set up that we've been looking at over parts of Canada is ushering in that very cold and dry air. Because sometimes also we'll see a front come through over the Great Lakes and through Canada, but that's kind of all being choked out because of that dry air mass. So kind of what we're relying on is these storms coming up from maybe the southeast. But obviously there are so many factors. I would say along with hurricanes, nor'easters, your typical nor'easters, one of the hardest winter weather systems to track because there are just so many factors that go into making it that perfect storm where we might get a foot of snow.
Right. So many things have to be in place. You need the high pressure nearby to supply the cold air. You want it to be in a certain location that way the wind direction's just right. You want the storm track to be just right. I mean, we always mention the benchmark off the coast. There's a lot of factors that go into play. You want the storm to be strong enough to provide the moisture and have it be all snow.
Because we kind of saw that with this storm this past weekend where it had the potential maybe to bring higher snow totals across the area, but it was so dry and cold already that then the storm not being able to really strengthen itself prevented it from producing those higher snowfall amounts.
Right. So to answer this question from Charles, I'm going to say, going back to what our own Tony Petrarca did, he did a winter outlook at the beginning of winter, and he did reference that, looking at all the data and all the things, the signals, it would be pointing to a near average, if not slightly below average snowfall. Right now we're around 5 inches of snow in Providence or at Warwick at the airport, and I'm sure some locations maybe have a little bit more than that. But you know,
and
we're
our
kind
average is 35 inches at that
Yes.
same location at the airport where we keep our records. So we are far from that.
we are.
I do think we will see more than 5 inches this year, but it'll be interesting to see if we even approach the average, since we are already
So far behind.
getting
yeah.
towards the end of January at this
Yeah,
point.
and you know what we've learned is we all know is it only takes one storm to really change those numbers. So far, it hasn't happened. Will it happen going forward? We still have all of February, and you know we do get we can get pretty big storms in March too. So we do have a couple of months left to really enhance those numbers. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But to answer that, you know, it's just more of a don't give up hope if you love snow. You
Yeah,
still
I
have some
think,
time.
and with the cold air we've seen, anything that does come through could very well be snow
Right.
instead of rain, which is what we saw last year. So a lot different pattern set up. And with that, let's go into question 6, kind of
one's a fun
relates
one,
to this. This is a good question. This is from Andrew in Barrington. Is it true that if snow stays on the ground for 3 or more days, there's more likely a chance that it will snow again sometime soon? And I guess the short answer to that would be it doesn't necessarily mean we'll see snow again sometime soon, but when you have snow that stays on the ground, it overall lowers the surface temperature. So if we saw a storm coming through, it would help it promote the production of snow as the precipitation type over rain.
Right, it would keep the ground temperature itself cold. It would keep the air right above the surface cold because, of course, it's like a layer of ice, literally snow and ice. You know, and one of these things is we mentioned that the sun reflects off the snow on the ground. So if you think about, say, in the summertime, if you're in the water at the beach, you put sunscreen on when you're in the water because the rays can reflect off the water and actually cause you to burn when you're in the water. So very similar idea there. It's just the winter version, I guess you could say. So what that helps, that means that the sun's not totally reaching the surface and the ground and warming it up as much as it would, say, on grass.
Which, like this week, for example, we've seen these very below average temperatures with the snow on the ground, which has helped promote it being much colder than we would typically see this
and
time
it
of year.
makes the ground temperature, the soil temperature even colder as well, which again, you know, that could lead to, if we have any of the water or liquid on the ground, could mean more ice because it'll freeze over. So a very interesting question. A nice one to kind of think about.
This is another one bringing us back to our
our
meteorology
college days. Yeah.
Because this is one of the things they teach us about with like weather patterns and the differences. I went to school at Linden State for a couple years, and that was a big factor. Was we had snow on the ground pretty much from late October to early May. So there was tons of opportunities to see snow anytime a system came through.
And the only thing I thought about as well about this question, just quickly here, is, you know, with the snow staying on the ground longer, that must mean that it's cold out, right? Which that supports snow. So maybe that was kind of where this one's going.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like,
no,
the pattern supports it.
The kind of summing it all up, the main thing here is that we certainly have the cold air in place. It's just a matter of the factors lining up for us to actually see some bigger storms that'll give us those higher snowfall totals this year.
Yeah, and we still have February and March to go, and that's kind of where our bigger storms have been in history. So we will see what those 2 months bring us. We still have a lot of winter to go, so if you are a snow lover, don't give up hope yet. And if you don't like snow, then you're probably loving what we've had so far. So certainly that's good news. But I think that concludes our Beyond the Forecast. I used to call it winter edition or winter version. Thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it. And make sure you check back to look for our next one for next month.